Hi everyone, this is Champagne Friday again. What have I chosen today? Well, two brands, one grower with two champagnes and one very famous house. Let's start with the famous house. Lanson, one of the biggest, one of the greatest, one of the most historic of all houses, one of the oldest, actually founded in 1760 by François de la Motte. You know, that name rings a bell from Le Menil, doesn't it? And also, they were knights of the Malteser Order, which is, that's why you have this cross from Malta, as you've probably seen on the labels. There's been a problem with Lanson over the years, but a lovely problem. I like it so much. It's this ongoing debate about malolactic or non-malolactic. For the vintage wines, it's obvious that they become so much better because they are not made with malolactic fermentation. So they peak between something between 30 or 50 years, which is gorgeous. The problem's been that most bottles of Lanson been Black Label, and the Black Label is a non-vintage, only aged for a short period of time, and very harsh, very tough acidity. Strong appley notes, that's the direct aggressiveness that you find. But then they created Extra Age, which was the same blend, aged for a longer time, released later. Now, new winemaker, one of my favorites, Hervé Danton, has a huge, fantastic background among the growers and working at Mailly, as the biggest and the best cooperatives of them all. And now he's making the wines at Lanson. I mean, the invention of Clos Lanson, for instance, that's his baby. So what did he do here? It's partially, not everything is non-malo, so it's part of it is malolactic, but the majority of the grapes are not going through malolactic. But with this Extra Age and the way he blends, you obtain a lovely balance. But in my personal view, you still can age it even longer. This one, it's not called Black Label, it's called Le Black. And Le Black, this one is Le Black Réserve, which is the Extra Age name. And you look at the backside, it's so wonderful, isn't it? With all the new information you can read. Dosage levels, disgorgement dates. This one is a little bit tricky because it's 100 villages and it's impossible to write all of them, but 70% Grand and Premier Cru from 100 villages. 45% reserve whites and 14 based. So approximately the average age is 10, 12 years, something like that, and from very good villages. So you got this nervous, typical Lanson note, and as well as some maturity. At my point of view, aged a little bit longer, but let's taste. Le Black Réserve, 2014 based. You know, I haven't been tasting for such a long time. I've been running a lot, been training a lot. I had so much work to do with my launch of Champagne Magnum Opus. So I felt I'd take a little bit of a break after that, and now I'm longing for really good champagne. Very strong, very typical. First of all, this freshly crushed apples. That's what comes directly. When I poured it, when I was sitting from this distance, that was quite strong. So a mix between mashed yellow and red apples. That's the most important thing. Slightly yeasty, but also freshly baked bread. Somewhere in between right now. If you age it for 2 more years, it will not be any yeastiness. It will be clear, fresh baguette note, which is the same that works towards that direction. Beautiful Mirabelle plums. A little bit of dark chocolatey notes, tar tobacco. Extremely true to the house style. Really something in between the regular vintage wine and the non-vintage because of this Extra Age. Of course, the blend is is less precise, less chalky, which is a typicity that you can find in the vintage wines. But the age is approximately the same. The stage of maturity is approximately the same as the vintage wine right now. A beauty, clearly recommended non-vintage wine. Growers, where are we heading now? Look here. 2 bottles from one of the 4 Vesslorna, as we say in Swedish, the Vessels. It's a small animal which I don't know the name of in English. So
Weasel.
The weasel, it might be. A small thing running around, a little bit nervous. Anyway, this one is not Alain, it's not Maurice, it's not Jean. It is the best of them all. It's Georges Vesselle. Today made from Eric and Bruno Vesselle. And always very, very strict to its own house style. Very dry, very precise. Boussy is one of the most famous Grand Cru villages for its Pinot Noir, of course. But very importantly is to remember that it's not everything is not great. There is a huge majority of wines which are a little bit more Premier Cru level, I would say. But the best levels, which are very close to the steepest part, close to the forest. And then normally you have the mid-slope being the best, but in Boussy that's not the case. The upper hill, the most northerly, is the one with the strongest minerality because it's steeper. And Georges Vesselle, all the grapes are coming from there in the vintage wines and in the Blanc de Noirs that we're going to taste. So, from the regular vintage, always 90% Pinot Noir, 10% Chardonnay, everything 100% directly from Boussy. And that is also the grape mix of the village in general. It's 90% Pinot Noir in the entire village. And they make the same vintage wine in 2 versions. One which is the regular one with a normal dosage, which is not very high, and then one without dosage, calling it Brut Zero or Brut Nature. In this case, I need to check because they changed it quite recently. Nature, 2013. Next to it, it's unfortunately, it got a lot of information, but it doesn't say which is the vintage base. So let's see if I can find that. But it's the Blanc de Noirs. It's even richer, even rounder, 100% Pinot Noir, and a small dosage to add onto it. Okay, let's try. I'm starting to laugh because, well, for all of you who read my books, you've probably seen that in all the champagnes from Georges Vesselle, there's a specific note which me and Carl Jung, one of the best, I don't speak about the psychological guy, I speak about the chef, Carl Jung, the Swedish guy. We sat together in one tasting and we were starting to laugh. And then we said, I found something I never seen or I never noticed before in a wine. And we wrote exactly the same thing, which is wild strawberry meringue. Have you ever tasted that? No? And he's a chef, but he created it afterwards. So instead of strawberries, you use wild strawberries notes and meringue. So it's always there. We don't know if it's a pure terroir thing or it's a combination between things in the air, in the atmosphere that pops into the bottles. It's just a Georges Vesselle note. 13 without dosage. You might thought it was slightly strange to put these champagnes next to each other, but my idea was that there are a lot of similarities because you have only 35% of Chardonnay in the Lanson, and in this rather tough acidity that you have, it's the same here, but from the minerality from Boussy and as well the zero dosage. So you will get some similarities in all 3 champagnes. I just without tasting the Blanc de Noir, I think we could have more diversity between those 2 in terms of overall impression. So slightly too harsh and dry for just drinking directly now, because it's more gastronomic, it's for seafood, and they say foie gras. I would never take it to foie gras, but that's in Bruno and Eric says. But mid-palate, it's gorgeous. Such a strong intensity. The purity. When you taste growers from Boussy, you have some really flamboyant ones. You have this fantastic Pierre Paillard vineyard wines that are popping up more and more. Strong intensity and personality. You have Lahai, which is making a very outgoing, strong style. You have some Cloés, which are about the same. But when it comes to purity, it's only Paul Barat and Comtesse Marie de France, which is for me even purer and more interesting, with a little bit more of this cloudberry notes, etc. So, minerality-wise, sharp, beautiful, precise. A little bit undeveloped, but beautiful attack. Age it 5-6 more years. Blanc de Noirs. Same guy. Same vinification. Different plots within Boussy. Much rounder. Starting with the same perfume. And the perfume is not that simple as I say, but majority of the aroma is actually those wild strawberries meringue. But on top of that, you have some really beautiful marmalade notes, you have some slightly toasted notes, and you have a very fresh, cold side to it, which is, I would say, like snow or something really clear and bright. Same here, but now much more honeysuckle rose, a note that I find quite often in good Blanc de Noirs. And for sure, we also have some citrusy notes, more tangerine, mandarin notes, and because there is a little bit of sugar, the imagination or the fantasy or the notes that you find will go very creamy, very buttery, very caramel. Seems almost over-flattering, which is not the case. It's perfectly balanced, but it's easier to drink. It's more direct, it's more charming than the Brut Nature, which is slightly more gastronomic. So, a small lesson about the grower Georges Vesselle with his typical note, you remember now, wild strawberries and meringue. Lanson, the apples, both the red and the yellow. The harsh, tough, non-mallow acidity, but with some age, more chocolatey, bread notes which are starting slightly yeasty, becoming beautiful and bread-like with time.